Emily Parker, a 27-year-old social media influencer, had built her brand from scratch. Her lively personality, makeup tutorials, and daily vlogs attracted millions of followers. Emily's life seemed perfect on the surface. Her followers adored her cheerful smile and bubbly persona, and she became a rising star in the influencer world. But behind the screen, she felt the weight of constant attention. Every day, she received countless messages, some full of admiration and others disturbing. One particular fan, an anonymous user with the handle TrueFan89, had been persistently messaging her for weeks. At first, it seemed harmless, a few comments about her makeup or a compliment on her looks. But as time went on, the messages became obsessive. "I know where you got that dress," one read. "You looked beautiful at the cafe today," said another. Emily brushed it off as a coincidence, convincing herself that it was just a random fan who recognized her in public. But her unease grew. Her best friend and manager, Sophie, noticed Emily's anxiety. They were sitting together at a cafe, planning their next brand collaboration. Sophie was always the level-headed one, the one who handled the business side of things, while Emily focused on content creation. "You've been distracted lately. Is everything okay?" Sophie asked, sipping her iced coffee. Emily hesitated before admitting, "It's probably nothing, but there's this fan. He's been messaging me a lot lately, and some of the things he says, it feels like he's watching me." Sophie's expression turned serious. "That's not nothing, Emily. You need to take this seriously. Do you know who it is?" Emily shook her head. "No, the profile is just a blank avatar with a username, TrueFan89. I've tried blocking him, but he keeps creating new accounts." Sophie reached across the table, squeezing Emily's hand. "Listen, we can't ignore this. I'll contact the platform's security team and see if they can track the account. And maybe we should consider hiring some security, just in case." Emily agreed, but a part of her still felt like she was overreacting. After all, she had millions of followers. Wasn't it normal to have a few weird ones? Later that evening, Emily returned to her luxurious apartment, exhausted from a day of photo shoots and meetings. She decided to take a break and unwind with a glass of wine. She scrolled through her phone, checking the comments on her latest video. Most of them were positive, filled with praise and hearts, but as she scrolled further, she froze. "I see you're home alone tonight. Nice choice of wine." Her heart raced. The message was from TrueFan89. Emily looked around her apartment, eyes darting to every corner. Her curtains were drawn, and the only light came from a small lamp by the couch. How did he know she was home? Her hands trembled as she dialed Sophie's number. "Sophie, it's him again. He just sent a message. He knows I'm home alone," Emily whispered, her voice filled with fear. "Lock your doors and windows. I'm calling the police," Sophie instructed firmly. Emily rushed to check her front door, making sure it was locked. She peered through the peephole, but the hallway was empty. Her apartment was on the 5th floor, and the building had security, so how could anyone be watching her? She closed the blinds tightly, her mind racing with possibilities. As she waited for Sophie to arrive, another message popped up on her phone. "Don't be scared, Emily. I'm your biggest fan. I just want to get to know you better." Emily's breath hitched. She felt sick. This wasn't just a fan, this was someone who was watching her every move. She didn't know how, but she knew one thing for certain. She was no longer safe. A knock on the door made her jump. She peeked through the peephole and saw Sophie standing outside with a worried look on her face. Emily quickly let her in and locked the door behind her. "The police are on their way," Sophie said, hugging Emily. "We'll get to the bottom of this." Emily nodded, but as she clung to her friend, her eyes landed on her phone screen again. A final message had come through, and this one sent chills down her spine. "You can lock the door, but you can't hide from me." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she realized that her perfect online life had turned into a real-life nightmare. Someone out there was watching her, and this was only the beginning of their twisted game. Emily's usually vibrant apartment felt suffocating. Every shadow seemed to move, every creak amplified her fear. The police had arrived within minutes, but their investigation left her feeling unsatisfied. They took her statement, noted down details about the messages, and assured her they would look into it. They were skeptical. To them, it was probably just another case of an overactive imagination or a fan who had crossed a line. Sophie stayed with Emily that night, refusing to leave her alone. As they sat together on the couch, trying to distract themselves with a movie, Emily's mind kept wandering back to the messages. "How could he know I was home alone?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "And why does it feel like he's always a step ahead of me?" Sophie frowned. "Maybe he's following you in real life, watching you from a distance," she suggested cautiously. "But he could also have hacked into your phone or your social media accounts. You share so much of your life online, Em. It wouldn't be hard for someone determined enough to piece together your routine." Emily's face paled. "I never thought about it that way. I just assumed I was being careful." The next morning, they decided to take action. Emily's online presence was her livelihood, but it had become a threat. Sophie called a tech expert she knew, Tom, to check Emily's devices for any signs of hacking. Tom was a middle-aged, no-nonsense guy with a reputation for being able to trace almost anything online. He arrived with his equipment and set to work immediately. As Tom examined her laptop and phone, Emily sat on the edge of her seat, watching him anxiously. "Do you think you'll find anything?" she asked. "I can't say for sure yet, but I'll do my best. These days, it's surprisingly easy for someone to access your devices if they know what they're doing." After an hour of scanning, Tom looked up, his expression grim. "I found a tracking app on your phone," he said. "It's well hidden, but someone installed it recently. They've had access to your camera, microphone, and even your location data." Emily's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God, he's been watching me this whole time." Tom nodded. "Most likely. I've removed the app and secured your phone, but you need to be careful. Don't click on any suspicious links and change all your passwords. Whoever this is, they're determined." The revelation left Emily feeling exposed. Her life had been an open book, not just to her followers, but to this unknown intruder. She shuddered at the thought of him watching her every move, hearing her conversations, and knowing exactly where she was at all times. Sophie squeezed her hand. "We'll get through this, Em. We'll catch him." Despite the fear gripping her, Emily felt a spark of anger. She had worked too hard to let someone ruin her life like this. "You're right," she said, her voice firmer. "I'm not going to let him control me. We need to find out who this is." That evening, Emily made a decision. She was going to turn the tables on her stalker. Instead of hiding, she would put herself out there, but this time she'd be in control. She would set a trap. With Sophie's help, she planned her next move. They decided to host a live stream from a local cafe, a place she often visited. They wanted to see if he would show up in person, revealing himself among the crowd. As the time for the live stream approached, Emily's heart raced. She set up her phone and began chatting with her followers, keeping her voice cheerful even though she felt anything but. Sophie watched from a nearby table, scanning the cafe for anyone suspicious. Emily glanced at the screen, watching the comments roll in. Her regular fans filled the chat with compliments and questions. But then she saw it. A message from TrueFan89. "Nice cafe choice, Emily." Emily's blood ran cold. Her eyes darted around the room. It felt like everyone was watching her, like every person could be him. Sophie's eyes met hers, filled with the same alarm. Suddenly, Sophie spotted a man in the corner, his phone angled suspiciously towards Emily. Sophie didn't waste a second. She stood up and approached him. "Excuse me, are you recording her?" Sophie demanded. "Just a fan enjoying the view," he said calmly. His voice was unsettling, but he didn't match the image Emily had of her stalker. Sophie backed off, returning to Emily's side. "He's not the one," she whispered, "but someone here is." Emily ended the stream abruptly, feeling a wave of panic wash over her. Whoever this person was, he was close. Too close. The encounter at the cafe had left Emily more paranoid than ever. The unnerving message from TrueFan89 was all she could think about. Her usual routine of posting light-hearted content felt tainted now, as if her entire online presence had become a trap she set for herself. Emily knew she had to dig deeper. She needed answers, and she needed them fast. Sophie, sensing Emily's determination, had already contacted Tom. They agreed to meet at Emily's apartment to figure out the next steps. When Tom arrived, he brought a new device, a small laptop filled with special tracking software. "We're going to try and trace this guy," Tom explained. If he messages you again, I can use the software to track his IP address and get a general idea of where he's operating from. It's not a guaranteed method, but it might give us a lead. Emily's nerves tingled with a mix of fear and hope. Okay, she agreed, let's do this. They set up in Emily's living room, her phone placed on the coffee table as they waited. Minutes felt like hours. Emily kept glancing at her phone, almost willing it to ping with a new notification. Sophie paced back and forth, clearly restless. After what felt like an eternity, her phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a new message notification. It was from TrueFan89. You think you're safe? I see everything. Emily's hand trembled as she read the message out loud. Tom's fingers flew across the keyboard. Come on, he muttered, as lines of code scrolled past. Finally, he looked up, his face grim. I've got a location, he said. It's not precise, but it's coming from an area across town. An industrial area, mostly abandoned warehouses. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. She knew that place. It was a part of town no one visited anymore, unless they were up to no good. What could he possibly be doing there? She wondered aloud. We need to check it out, Sophie said, her voice resolute. We can't just let this go. Tom hesitated. Are you sure? It could be dangerous. This guy isn't just some troll. He's willing to track your location and threaten you. We don't know what he's capable of. But Emily was already grabbing her coat. I'm not going to sit around and wait for him to come to me, she said, her eyes blazing with anger. If this is a game, then I'm playing to win. Sophie and Tom exchanged a glance, then nodded. They piled into Tom's car and made their way across town. Tom led them to a small, dilapidated building, the one the signal had traced to. This is it, he whispered. Stay close. The door creaked as Emily pushed it open. The inside was dimly lit, filled with old, dusty furniture and abandoned equipment. It looked like it hadn't been used in years, but there were fresh footprints on the floor. Someone had been here recently. Emily's heart raced as she stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room. In the corner, she spotted something that made her blood run cold. A table with several photos laid out on it. They were all of her. Different moments from the past few weeks were captured. Emily leaving her apartment, meeting with Sophie, filming her live stream. This is sick, Sophie muttered, her face pale. She picked up one of the photos, examining it. He's been watching you, Emily. Every day. Emily felt a wave of nausea, but fought it down. We need to find him, she said, her voice shaking but determined. He can't get away with this. Suddenly, Tom's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his face going pale. We have a problem, he said slowly. He knows we're here. Emily's phone buzzed at the same time. She looked down to see another message from TrueFan89. Brave of you to come here, but this is my game and I make the rules. Time to go home, Emily. He wasn't just watching her online, he had been watching her in real life too. And now he knew exactly where they were. Tom grabbed her arm. We need to leave. Now. As they rushed out of the building, Emily's mind raced. This wasn't just a random stalker, this was personal, calculated. He had been one step ahead of them the whole time, and now he had lured them into his trap. Her stalker was more than just a deranged fan. He was a predator, and she was his prey. The drive back to Emily's apartment was silent, each of them lost in their own thoughts. Emily felt a mix of anger and fear gnawing at her. She had never imagined her life would spiral into this kind of nightmare. Sophie kept glancing at her from the passenger seat, concern etched on her face. Tom was focused on the road, his jaw clenched, clearly deep in thought about their next move. When they arrived, Emily went straight to her living room, pacing back and forth. The reality of the situation was sinking in. She was being hunted. And whoever this stalker was, he knew her every move. Sophie spoke up first. Emily, we need to go to the police, she said firmly. This isn't just online harassment anymore. He's physically stalking you. Emily shook her head. I don't know, Sophie. The police might not take it seriously. Plus, we have no solid proof of who he is. Just some photos and creepy messages. They might not even be able to trace him. Tom, still looking pensive, interjected. The police might not be much help without solid evidence, but we need to do something. We can't just wait for him to make his next move. We need to find out who this guy is before he does something worse. Emily took a deep breath, her eyes narrowing. "Then we fight fire with fire," she said. "We bait him." Sophie looked shocked. "What do you mean? You want to draw him out?" "Yes," Emily replied. "He's been following my every move. He thinks he's in control, but we can use that against him. I'll do another live stream, just like normal. But this time, we'll be ready for him." Tom seemed to understand her plan. "If we can set up the right surveillance, we might be able to catch him in the act," he agreed. "We can use the stream as bait. But we need to be careful. If he realizes what we're doing, it could get dangerous." Sophie still looked uneasy, but nodded. "Okay, but we need to be prepared for anything. Let's set up cameras around your apartment, hidden ones. If he tries to break in or follow you, we'll have it on tape." Tom set up a monitoring system on his laptop, testing each angle to ensure they had a clear view of every entry point. It felt surreal, turning her cozy home into a surveillance trap, but Emily knew it was necessary. Once everything was in place, Emily took a deep breath and set up her camera for the live stream. "Hey everyone," she greeted her viewers, trying to sound cheerful and casual. "I thought tonight we could just chat. Let me know your questions in the comments." As she spoke, she noticed the usual flood of comments from her fans. It felt almost normal for a moment. But then, a familiar notification popped up. TrueFan89 had entered the chat. Emily forced a smile, her pulse quickening. "I see we've got some regulars here tonight," she said, her eyes scanning the screen. She watched as TrueFan89 sent a message. "Nice to see you again, Emily. Are you alone tonight?" Emily's stomach twisted, but she kept her expression neutral. "Not at all," she said. "I've got all my amazing viewers with me." Behind the scenes, Tom's fingers flew over the keyboard as he tracked the message. "Got him," Tom muttered, his eyes glued to the screen. "He's nearby. The signal is coming from right outside the building." Emily's heart skipped a beat. He was here. Right now. She kept talking, keeping her viewers engaged while Tom and Sophie silently communicated, deciding their next move. Suddenly, there was a loud knock at her front door. The sound startled Emily, but she didn't let it show on her face. Instead, she glanced off camera, pretending it was nothing. Tom whispered urgently, "That's him. Stay calm. We need to keep him occupied while we check the cameras." Sophie quietly slipped into the hallway, her phone out as she watched the live feed from the cameras. Outside the door, a figure moved wearing a black hoodie, the face obscured. Sophie's eyes widened as she watched the man bend down, fiddling with something near the lock. Emily's voice wavered slightly as she continued her stream. "You know, sometimes I get scared living alone," she said, subtly hinting at her situation without alarming her viewers. "But I'm glad I have all of you to keep me company." Tom looked up, his face pale. "He's trying to pick the lock," he whispered. Emily's mind raced. She had to make a decision, end the stream and call the police, or confront him now while they had a chance to catch him red-handed. She glanced at Sophie, who gave her a nod, holding up her phone as she dialed 911. The knock on the door came again, more insistent this time. Emily ended the stream abruptly. "Thank you for watching, everyone. I'll see you soon," she said quickly, shutting off her camera. Just as she ended the broadcast, the front door swung open and a man stepped inside. His face was still obscured by the hoodie, but Emily could see a glint of something metallic in his hand. A knife. Sophie stepped out from behind the door, her voice loud and authoritative. "The police are on their way," she shouted. "You're caught." The man hesitated for a split second before turning to run, but Tom was faster. He tackled the intruder to the ground, the knife clattering to the floor. Emily watched, her breath held, as the stranger struggled beneath Tom's grip. The sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Emily's heart pounded in her chest. They had him. But who was he? And why had he been so obsessed with her? As the police burst through the door, Emily knew she was about to get some answers. The police quickly cuffed the intruder, pinning him to the floor. His face was still obscured by the hoodie, but Emily finally felt a glimmer of relief. The fear that had been haunting her for weeks was about to end. Tom and Sophie stood by her side, their eyes locked on the man who had terrorized her. As the officers pulled the hood back, Emily's eyes widened in shock. It wasn't a stranger. It was Paul, one of her longtime friends from the early days of her social media journey. He had been supportive, always in the background, showing up at her events and occasionally helping her with content. She had never suspected him, Paul. Emily's voice was barely a whisper, her mind struggling to connect the dots. Why? What is this about? Paul's face was twisted in a mixture of anger and desperation. You left me behind, Emily, he spat out. I was there when you had nothing. I helped you grow, but when you got big, you forgot about me. I watched as you became friends with everyone else, but I was ignored, cast aside. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. She had no idea Paul harbored such deep resentment. She remembered him as quiet and helpful, never demanding attention. But this version of him was different. Dark, bitter, and dangerous. The police lifted Paul to his feet, leading him towards the door. You were never supposed to find out, he mumbled. It was supposed to be our little game, just between you and me. Emily's hands trembled as she clutched Sophie's arm. A game, she repeated, her voice shaky. You tormented me, stalked me, and broke into my home. This was never a game, Paul. It was a nightmare. Paul struggled against the officers, his face contorting with rage. You're mine, Emily. I made you what you are today. You owe me. Sophie stepped forward, her face stern. You need help, Paul, she said firmly. This isn't love, it's obsession. Tom, his face pale, watched as Paul was dragged away. He turned to Emily, his eyes filled with worry. Are you okay? Emily took a deep breath, nodding slowly. I think so, she whispered. I just never imagined it would be someone I knew. I feel betrayed. Tom put a comforting hand on her shoulder. He fooled us all, Emily. The important thing is that you're safe now. He's been caught, and he won't hurt you again. As the police escorted Paul out, he screamed over his shoulder, This isn't over, Emily. You'll remember me forever. His voice echoed down the hallway until it was drowned out by the sound of the police car sirens. Sophie pulled Emily into a hug. You did it, she said softly. You faced him. It's over now. The following weeks were a blur. Emily gave her statement to the police, provided them with all the evidence they had collected. She had faced her fears and had come out stronger. She had reclaimed her life, her sense of safety, and her peace. She felt a sense of closure wash over her. It was finally over.